Hey guys, this is Mogamu, and today I'm checking out the Chroma Warframe. Chroma is an elementalist warframe, and he uses his 4 basic elements to buff himself and his teammates and even to deal damage. You can get his parts from the New Strange quest from Samaritan to Relay, and just make sure you finish the Stolen Dreams quest first. Now as far as stats, his health and shields are pretty moderate, but he does have a nice bit of armor, making him really tanky at times. But the key to using Chroma is using his energy and using his abilities to manage things like health, shield, and armor. Chroma's first ability, Spectral Scream, shoots a cone of elemental damage. So red is for heat, blue is for electricity, green is for toxin, and any of the neutral colors like white, gray, or black are going to be used for cold damage. Now, I use the term damage really lightly because the damage is pretty low, but it does have a pretty decent status chance for crowd control. So the heat will make enemies panic, electricity will chain stun from enemy to enemy, and cold will freeze enemies, and so far I prefer cold damage over the others. And this can be pretty useful in small areas, but the range is really small in this ability, and mods don't really make that much of a difference in especially the big areas. So even though this is affected by range and strength mods, it really won't make much of a difference. And I'd recommend something like a Prime Flow mod and energy efficiency for the power drain. Elemental Ward is an area buff that will affect you and your teammates. Again, this is going to be affected by your elemental type and your energy color. So heat deals damage and it'll add health to the squad. Electricity is going to absorb and reflect damage and also buff up your shields. Toxin is going to add a lot of stamina buffing that's going to be really good for melee. And cold will buff up some of that armor and reflect damage back to enemies with a chance of slowing those enemies down. So again, I typically prefer the cold element. Now the buffs are minimal, with cold really being the best one to scale versus some of the tougher enemies. But again, the problem here is going to be range, and teammates have to be within 12 meters, basically hugging distance to Chroma. Elemental Ward is affected by strength, range, and duration mods. Vex armor is, well, Chroma's best ability right now. He gets buffs for taking damage, so damage to shields is called Scorn, which will give you armor, and any damage to health directly is going to be called Fury, and that's going to give you more damage output. And this is why Chroma is more of a tanky bruiser class more so than a buffer class. Vex armor makes him a really strong tank slash damage dealer and not really support. And he has to manage his energy to be that tank or to be that bruiser, but it's not really that much of a problem if you have the right mods. So if you add duration and strength mods, Vex armor is probably going to be his best ability. So everyone who said Chroma was ugly, don't worry, because he does have thick skin that comes off and tries to kill everything in a room. Effigy will float in place, it'll shoot anything that comes at you, bro, with whatever element you choose. Again, I prefer cold. But any enemy it doesn't kill will get knocked down if it gets too close, which is really good because it doesn't do a lot of damage anyway. And enemies it kill will have a chance to drop more credits because Dragon, I guess. Either way, it's a really good way to defend a position. Just try to stay behind Effigy, especially since you lose quite a bit of armor once you cast it, but you do get to move a little bit faster. Effigy is affected by strength mods, but I would recommend using energy efficiency and maybe a Prime Flow to get more duration. So to get started modding, I'm going to show 2 builds. One build is going to be geared more towards being a tanky bruiser type, and the other build is going to be more towards a support buffer type. Now I don't recommend the support buffer type right now unless your teammates really demand that type of build. I'm going to recommend more of the tanky bruiser build where you can take damage and deal damage. So starting with this build, we're going to have a V aura slot. Let's add steel charge. That's going to give us more energy and also more melee output, especially since you're going to be up close. You're going to be using life strike to get your health back. We're going to put streamline on for energy efficiency. Now we're not going to use fleeting expertise because we're going to lose a lot of duration, and duration is very important. You don't want your duration going down in the middle of a fight and losing all that armor and end up dying. So instead of fleeting expertise, we're going to add a Prime Flow for more energy efficiency. That's going to work really good for his first and his fourth ability because they actually drain energy for their duration. And we're going to add a rage mod to get any energy back anytime you take damage to health. Now we're going to add a lot of power strength with blind rate and transient fortitude. That's going to really help his abilities get more buffs. He's going to be able to get more armor, not necessarily for damage output on his abilities, but so he can become more tanky. And we're going to add narrow minded for more duration so those buffs don't come down. and vitality because we get a lot more effective health with all of that armor, and you can also use that health to be more tanky. Now, narrow-minded is going to hurt your range by a whole lot, so this is not going to be a very good build for a support frame. But if your teammate decides that they want more of a support frame and it actually gets buffed where it actually has more range in the future, I would recommend more of a build like this, where you're going to actually bring your fleeting expertise back. You're going to add a rank 4 stretch to get that buff out farther to teammates who are really far away from you. And we're going to remove narrow-minded because that's going to hurt our range, and put prime continuity. Of course, if you don't have that, add a regular continuity and a constitution mod for more duration. So overall, Chroma is quite a ways away from being a strong support buffer type frame, especially at high levels, because those buffs don't really scale that well unless you're talking about the armor buff. But his own personal tankiness, his ability to solo, and his ability to defend a fixed position are all really good skills. Mostly because he's so good at making his armor scale at high level.